afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad you're. I'm laughing because my next guest and I talked about this NPR voice that I'm using today. It's just where I'm at. Let me tell you, if you're anywhere outside the Pacific Northwest, then you probably expect that we're soaked in rain. But it is so freaking gorgeous outside right now. So if you have an opportunity, get outside in the woods. You can still watch this right there on your smartphone. Just dial up the YouTube channel. You can subscribe below. You can see that link. If you're anywhere else other than YouTube, I'm going to cut this off on you in a little bit because I want you to go to YouTube. So grab the link while I'm talking to you about it. It's youtube.com/allaccesslive with Kevin Rankin. You can subscribe there. You can hit the bell, be notified when I've got next guests. And you'll also get to go back and you can look at the archives of 176 incredible people that I've talked to on this show since May 3rd of last year. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about my reflection on some of these episodes. They've kept me alive. They've changed my life. I think we've changed a lot of lives without me even knowing it. I've had clients that reached out to me that I did not know watched this show, and they've talked to me about how empowering it was on some of the really special female guests that I've had. Wednesday last week, I had Tawny Katane on. Everybody knew Tawny Katane as this heartthrob from the 80s, the sex symbol that was in all of the Whitesnake videos and Tom Hanks' girl in Bachelor Party and Jerry Seinfeld's girlfriend on Seinfeld. But she opened up a lot last week. We talked about dealing with midlife crises and identity and cancer. And then she jumped on the next day with Rudy Sarzo. And Rudy Sarzo from Quiet Riot, Ozzy, Dio, and several other bands talked about overcoming the greatest of adversity. If you don't know Rudy's story, Rudy was on the bus with Ozzy Osbourne on tour when their pilot decided to buzz the tour bus as a little joyride with Randy Rhoads, their iconic guitarist, and the plane crashed. It hit the bus and crashed, killed Randy, killed their stylist, and killed the pilot. Rudy was on the bus, woke up to this crash thinking that the bus had crashed, but came out to see that his best friend was burning up in an inferno. And it took the joy out of music for him. So as we talked about this journey, and I would love for you to go back and look at the archives of that episode, he said, I lost the joy of playing music. I quit playing. I left Ozzy Osbourne, the greatest, biggest tour in the world at that point, because he lost his joy of playing. He lost his best friend. And as musicians, we face a whole different set of circumstances than somebody that maybe works a regular job or has sort of a regular persona. My guest today really knows a lot about that type of thing. Mental health is a really, really difficult topic for a lot of people to talk about. Rudy Sarzo on Thursday talked about his change, and really where he found a way to re-embrace life was through recovery. A lot of my guests have talked about overcoming the adversity. That's not the premise behind this show, but I love that they can be open and talk about it. So we're going to get deep today. Wasn't the intent, but my next guest and I have a really close bond. We've got so many things in common and a lot of trust and respect for each other. So before we get started, I want to tell you that my wonderful sponsors at 5 Star Guitars have sponsored this show since early on. And they've provided an opportunity for you, if you're an interested guitarist, to go to 5starguitars.com/allaccesslive and enter that promo code below. You'll get 15% off everything you see on those pages. You can get guitars and accessories, stands, picks, all that good stuff. And if you enter the promo code of AllAccess15, you'll get 15% off. If you're outside the area, then you might be surprised that there's also no sales tax. So you can save a ton of money by getting guitar stuff. You're going to save 15% if you use that promo code on everything you see there. And then you can get lessons from worldwide iconic players like Jennifer Batten. Jennifer, you probably know from the Michael Jackson videos and touring with Jeff Beck. She is an icon, and she teaches virtually through 5 Star Guitars. So she's also doing a symposium called Guitar Cloud Symposium, where she has the greatest guitarists in the world that join her to teach you not only how to play guitar, but how to manage this business, how to be successful online. Her symposium is several days. There's a discount that you can get right now through Friday. So if you go to guitarcloudsymposium.com, you can get a discount on this next symposium, which features Steve Lukather as a special guest. So Steve, you know from Toto, he was the guy that played guitar on that iconic Beat It song that Jennifer learned with the Eddie Van Halen solo. Luke is one of those guys that you've heard on thousands of records and didn't even know it. So he's going to be there with her as well. Go to guitarcloudsymposium.com, let her know I sent you, and jump in before tomorrow, because tomorrow at midnight is when you lose the big discount. It's still a great deal. You'll learn a lot. And then you can come back to 5-Star Guitars, have her teach you how to play it. And then you might be halfway closer to my next guest. My next guest is one of the most ubiquitous players around town. If you don't know what that means, this guy is in every metal corner. Every band that needs a metal drummer reaches out for this guy, because not only does he have the chops, but he has the hang. And I've talked about this on the show a lot, that you can be an incredible player, but if you don't have the personality, if you don't have the hang where you can be around somebody 24 hours a day, then nobody's going to want to play with you. Everybody wants to play with Thunder Joe Spencer, and that's why I've got him here. Joe, what's happening, pal?
Hey, good afternoon, Kevin. Thank you for that sweet introduction, buddy. I'm humbled and kind of shy.
I love the shyness, because people that know Thunder Joe know that you come in as a bowl in a china shop. Sometimes you'll just be playing. You've got this monstrosity to your playing, but you're very soft spoken and you are humble. So the humility thing is a really important part of the hang, right?
Right. I mean, if you're taking everybody's sunshine, then there's no room to share.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I guess I'm kind of guilty of that.
Well, you are a bringer of light, my friend. You brighten up every room that you're in. I can say that. I've been in enough rooms to actually hear crowds roar when you walk in.
They're like, let's get out of here. Yeah.
To the beer garden.
Yeah, right. Man, you've seen the show before. I try not to make it sort of a formal interview. I'm more of a fan of making it conversational.
Sure.
So, but you've got a pretty cool history of music, and you want to talk a little bit about where Thunder Joe developed his passion for playing music.
Sure, absolutely. And actually, if I may jump this, and can I give a couple shout outs on my and then I can unroll today's trilogy of info.
Yeah, but there are no rules here other than that we avoid politics if we can, and religion, kind of, otherwise you're ready to go.
Okay, yeah, if it's food, music, and art, I can talk to you all day. Right. I would actually like to give a shout out to my mom. One of the strongest, greatest ladies in my entire world. Without her, clearly I wouldn't be here, and I don't mean physically as a person. I mean physically in Oregon. So I owe a lot to the supportive structure of my parental mom. I would like to give a shout out to my friend Ron, my best friend of 25 years, who played in my first band. So when we talk about my humble upbringings, it begins with my friend Ron.
Okay.
I would like to say thanks to my coworkers. Of course, without them, I again wouldn't be here. It's the support of a team that really brings the mountain together to the peak. So I would like to thank my supervisor Rachel, my friend Lopez, my friend Fow, and my buddy T-Bird.
Man, so these guys have better nicknames than Thunder Joe. I like this.
You just wait till you see Trinitron on the big screen.
Okay,
that's
nice.
That's how that one would go. But yeah, no, we're all a super clique, and everything is like a very powerful team. So thank you very much for letting me get the shout outs to the people that allowed me to be here today. Thank you for that.
Yeah, man. All right. So now you're going to start over. Are you an Idaho guy originally?
I'm in Indiana. I'm a Hoosier.
Okay.
Yeah, way back northern Indiana, kind of up there in a town called Goshen. I mean, how creeping death is that? Land of Goshen, I am creeping death.
That's right. You know what else? Here's one thing that I'm going to request.
Oh, sure.
Your chair squeaks a bunch, and when you're rocking back and forth, it's pretty loud in the mic. So if we're gonna rock, I might have you switch chairs.
I'll quit shifting myself.
You're awesome. Yeah.
Good to know. With the ears in and whatever. That's probably above 10K, so I can't hear it.
Yeah, right. It's the China boy frequency right there.
Right? Yeah. Tinnitus? Yeah. Where is it? What?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I know that area kind of, Liberty, Metamora, all that area up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my ex-in-laws are all up in that neck of the woods.
Sure. Yeah. Up there, Fort Wayne kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, little corn sprout from up north there, and then moved to Idaho when I was 12.
Oh, okay.
And then by 15, here's where Paul Harvey's the rest of the story. So you all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
So I started playing drums with my brother Charlie and my brother James when I was about 10. And it was one of those, like, we had this shed and with pawn shop drum set, pawn shop drum kit, drum kit, guitar setup, and Nirvana's Nevermind just came out, and the Black Album had just come out.
Okay.
Metallica's Black Album. So my mind blown.
Yeah.
And everything was kind of life-changing from there. So whenever I moved out to Idaho when I was 12, I began playing music. Hey, Jeremy, if you happen to be watching this, good to see you, buddy. And started playing heavy metal songs with my friend Dustin, bless you, buddy, and my friend Ron. And then by the time I was 15, if I could say, it's one of these kind of classic little scenarios where I worked at a gas station, and there was a guy who was very prominent in our community as a musician. He was kind of a sideman for Steve Miller.
Okay.
And he was like a wrestler on WWF. So, I mean, he was 6'5", 400 pounds almost, just a big mountain of a man, a teddy bear. And he could play like David Gilmour. It was just beautiful. Like, tone in his hands had the Carlos Santana kind of vibe. David Gilmour, Jeff Beck. It was amazing. Chicken picking like a He was a sideman for the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh wow! Okay, he had chops.
He had chops, and so I go out there, 15 years old, this little burn CD, and I'm like, I present to you my humble offering. Will you please listen to this? Right. and he's like, how do I get as puffy as I can? He's like, hello, little kid. Let me put that in. Right. And 3 or 4 days later, I get a voicemail on the answering machine. You remember those on the old home phone, right? Answering machine. And he's like, hey, kid, this is Mike Clare. That's his name. His name was Mike Clare. He's like, hey, kid, this is Mike Clare. I can't get your disc out of my stereo. Wow. And my mind is like, oh, no, I fucked up the stereo. And he's like, I've been listening to it on repeat. You want to come work for me? And so 15 years old, I ended up getting a session gig at Maestro Design, which is a sound studio up in Sun Valley.
No kidding. Oh, my God.
And there it was. I had replaced the drummer of the Rembrandts.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
Yeah, if you remember Johnny Kelly and the song on Friends.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm there for you. Yeah.
That was his guy, but his guy, not knowing anything different from being, 15 years old like I was versus 40 now, where working conditions were iffy. It's like, okay, well, if it's not good enough for at the time 40-year-old Rembrandt's drummer, a 15-year-old kid will be glad to do it.
Yeah, right.
So I went in and cut my teeth on like 7 or 8 country albums over that year.
Wow.
And it was nice because it was like weekend work and then afternoon work, and then in the evenings I would go play heavy metal blast beats with my buddies Dustin and Ron, and we'd bang out the Master of Puppets album and everything that was new metal at the time. And so living in Sun Valley offered me a lot of access to people. Yeah. Like I was able to meet and hang out with Carole King, and able to hang out with Peter Cetera. I'm also kind of a graphic artist, so I became Peter's graphic artist for like 5 years.
No kidding.
Which was super crazy because then we'd be doing posters and backstage passes and laminates and all this for his gigs, and then I would be editing his intro DVD. What comes over the big screen and everything. And he's like, "Oh, hey, will you cut this scene out?" I'm like, "Sure, buddy."
Oh,
and then he's like, hey, calls me up. He's like, hey, Joe, it's Pete. Is it ready? I'm like, oh, hey, buddy, just come over in about an hour. It's almost done. I come over, and funny little stories. Like he would sing to me while I'm working. I'm sitting here plugging away, doing color correction on his face, and then he's like singing the Beatles' Blackbird to me while I'm at my desk. So these private concerts, these little private concerts from Peter Cetera were pretty adorable. It's kind of one of those like makes. If you can see how big the goosebumps are on me,
man.
I mean, I'm.
You're a hard habit to break, buddy. You're the inspiration, you know.
You're the meaning of my life.
You know, I would bet at that point, you know, it was really great as a younger musician to see how real, you know, every one of those musicians are, even though, you know, they hit, you know, like huge status. I would bet at that time, now, Peter was obviously still in Chicago at that point, right?
You know, I think he had left Chicago because this was 2002.
Oh, okay.
So right. I mean, I was like 15 in 1995.
Right.
So I was barely 20 or so. And then it worked out well that we were playing death metal at a rehearsal room. Oh my God. Okay, sorry, triggering of the whole versions of the memories. We rented rehearsal space from Dane Rage of London.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, Nikki Sixx's old band.
Yes. Yeah. So this Scandinavian man who's 6'7", looks like a Greek god, has the most stone face. He's a beautiful man. Beautiful man. Beautiful man. I don't even know how you could. Anyway, he's like, hey, I'm in a band, and I got to go to China to take on my toy line because he was an inventor who created Uber sticks. They were they were like Kinects, but Uber sticks.
That was his. Wow.
The drummer of London.
That's crazy. Good for him.
Yeah. No squeaks. And so as he's like, hey, you're in the same place as me with our bands and stuff like that. Why don't you just sit in for me? And then I'm going to go to China and launch my toy line. I'm like, oh my God, okay. So I joined this wonderful band called the Maladies, and we released 2 albums. And we had Steve Miller's personal assistant, Dave, be our manager. And we got to go record up at Carole King studio at Robertson Bar Ranch in Stanley, Idaho. Oh my God. And we just had I was sitting in this wooden cabin with all these gold records around, holding like a microphone that was worth more than me. Yeah. And it was just surreal experiences, right? So there I was like 24, 25. And then things kind of shifted, right? It was like I was playing on a TV show, doing country drums on a TV show, which had second most viewers behind the news, okay. Because we couldn't count Seinfeld reruns.
Right.
So it was every Saturday night it would launch, and we would record on Thursdays, and we had this cool theater, and we would play Opry-style music, right, where there was a house band, and we would showcase artists, and they'd come through kind of round-robin style, and it was fantastic. And while we were down there, I got to hang out with tons of local country people and tons of national country people. I'm terrible with her name, and I forget it, but we got to play a show with Prince's old keyboard player. Ooh. I know. I can't remember her name. It'll come to me.
Okay, so this is after the Revolution band. Then,
yeah, very, 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 very much so.
But I mean, they still had toured with Dr. Fink at that point, which was the original key from that era,
Okay, yeah, no, it was a sweet lady.
Okay,
I can't remember her name at the time, but it was super great. So we were able to do that, and I got to hang out with like Keb Mo and just fun people. So I'm like, okay, recap. And then that pretty much put me at about the time my daughter was born, and then life changed.
Sure.
Right? Having children and trying to, be a touring musician and all that became, I became a manager at a copy and print store and did graphics and posters. And it worked really well for me because then I was able to sneak in my personal product line through there, and flyers, emails, all that, and all the knowledge and experience that I was able to gain from being a manager, So that was all by the time I was like 25. And then took a couple years off and became a really hard alcoholic.
Oh, okay.
Which, I guess I don't know how many times your life has crashed or how deep it's got to crash for you to like do a 180. But, mine changed just enough to 180 me. And
how old were you at that point?
I was 26.
Okay.
Didn't take long.
No.
So from 26 to 29, I kind of don't remember. But it was a healthy period for my bill collectors. Because I was still able to stay employed and I didn't kind of lose myself too much. But functioning. Yeah, I was surviving.
Right.
And then when I was 29, I met a sweet, wonderful woman named Jamie who was a professional singer and moved over to Portland in the hopes of starting my musical 30s.
Did you meet Jamie there in Idaho, or was that?
Well, how's this for one of these super funny stories? It was I met her on Facebook.
Oh.
Because this was back in the day where up in the corner they were like, oh, people you know, or people you knew, or people you went to school with.
Okay.
Well, it turned out that we had gone to school together. I was a freshman and she was a senior. Okay. So she was a couple years older than me, and I'm like, oh, hey, click. Here's somebody I can promote my band to, right?
Yeah.
Just classic networking. And then she had posted a picture of, oh, hey, look, I just got a guitar, and I'm like, oh, hey, I have a studio here in Sun Valley. If you ever want to come over here, it's really nice to see blooming musicians. And she's like, oh, I'll have you know. And schooled me, right? She's like, oh, I'll have you know, I'm a 3-year this, that, and the other, and I can sing in 4 languages, and I can play 9 instruments, and I'm probably smarter than you. And I'm like, oh my God.
Joe's tail between his legs.
Yeah, I'm like, God, challenge accepted. Come over.
Nice.
Yeah, and so she ended up coming over, and then I ended up following her back to Oregon. And she finished out her years of school, and while she was doing her years of school, I started a symphonic metal band called Lumus. Which is amazing. It's not because I'm part of it. It's because of the other people that were part of it. And I'm very, very proud of that. I still think to this day it's my best effort on laid down recording.
So let me ask you, because that link below, the vandalism.com/Lumus the Barbarian, are there videos of Lumus in that?
There are.
Okay, because you got so much good stuff in there, but I hadn't gotten to look at it all. So.
Oh yeah, no. Right. There's think of it like Nightwish or like Queensryche with a female.
Oh,
or like Lindsey Sterling meets Queensryche.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
What happened with that band?
Wow. Well, that was one of those we literally got big enough to pop, and then everybody kind of backed out.
Afraid of the success and
Yep. We had 16,000 sales in Europe, and we had negotiations to go tour Europe or to go tour Japan with Queensryche. And our bass player, it's a great way to segue into mental illness.
Yeah.
Our bass player was a high functioning narcissist, and got everything he wanted out of the band, and kind of chose to not deliver on his end, which then became performing, making videos, answering emails, participating in a band, talking to us. That that kind of communication. And so
it's interesting. I don't want to interrupt you, but you said high functioning narcissist. It seems to me, and I hadn't really thought about it that much, but it seems like the narcissists that that we know in today's society, they're all kind of high functioning, right? Because they're getting what they want and they're taking advantage of everybody else around them. Their function seems to work, to their advantage anyway. So, but you're meaning that they maybe clouded or cloaked their narcissism enough to be able to get you guys to still engage and
sure. Yeah. It was very much not like the like high demand, forceful, heavy discard or very subtly manipulative. It was very with a smile, very, very in your face, very like plausible. Like I don't know how to say other than just to reach around with a backstab.
Oh my God, that's a great analogy. Okay.
I mean, it's like it's a lot. It's a lot. It brought a lot. It brought a lot to the surface when we realized we couldn't continue on. And so then, bless his heart, I found Mark Trees through Vandalism, right?
Really?
Here.
Okay.
So seeing this, like I jumped on Vandalism and was like, okay, I'm going to scout out guitar players, and then found Mark because he had exceptional tone and he had this amazing right picking hand, was like, Mark, come join our band. And at the time, we kind of didn't have anything. So Mark was technically in the band for a year and never played anything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then we kind of just disbanded. And then we kind of rebanded and we put together a little cover song of a Lindsey Sterling tune. And I played everything on it minus the violin. So it was kind of fun watching Mark play all the, guitar tracks. And I'm like, I know who played those. And, just kind of the fun there. And then after that, we just concluded Lumus. And Mark was like, oh, hey, I'm sorry to see the band drop. Well, do you have any interest in playing cover songs? I'm like, oh, like what? He's like, oh, like Metallica songs. And so that kind of was the stepping stone into me kind of auditioning for Motorbreath, which for those that don't know, that's the local Metallica tribute band that is in the area that I played shows with for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, man. Was that where the Bobblehead Limbs nickname came from?
That actually came from when I was in my 20s. A radio announcer from Twin Falls had a band, and he said that I looked like a bobblehead playing, and
right.
and if they had bobblehead limbs, that would be it. So I'm like, oh, that's a great. I'm going to hang on to that.
It is a good one. It really does describe the way you play really well. And I've got to see you in a few different environments, but Motorbreath, the Metallica tribute, was so fun because for me, I have a Lars story. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I actually just ran across this autographed 8x10 glossy that I have of the band. At that point, Newstead was still in the band. But the first Monsters of Rock tour, where it's Metallica, Scorpions, Van Halen, Dokken, and Kingdom Come, I drove to Spokane from Montana to go see him. And, man, just, actually, now that I say this, I don't want to disparage Lars. I'm just going to say my first experience with him was not a great one. He was a little bit condescending, and I was a punk kid. And so I held a grudge against him for a long time. And then I looked at all the other people that dogged Lars over the years and realized that band to me was one of those situations where the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. And I think the magic that happened with a certain lineup was incredible. You had the Cliff Burton era, which was unstoppable and bulletproof and really groundbreaking. The version that had Newstead in it, to me, was where the songs really were just like next level, and I thought the authenticity of Newstead just was so apparent, even though he didn't fit in, like personality wise, but he was my favorite guy at that point. And then, and now, the version with Trujillo was unbelievable, really great great musicians. I just don't see the chemistry there anymore, and so I don't mean to go off on a Metallica thing, but I think, the common denominator through the whole thing, of course, Lars and Hetfield and Kirk have all been there. I feel like Kirk, if you and I sat down with Kirk Hammett, I think we'd all three be very, very much alike. I think, and there's a lot of Newstead that I see in you and I as well, so, but Lars, different dude, I think you talked about high functioning narcissism. That's what I see with Lars. So anyway,
sure.
On to Motorbreath.
Cultural differences.
Right. I didn't mean to get off on Metallica, man. It's funny, but that was where I know for sure a majority of the Portland music scene and the area really got to know you because the shows were widespread. They were visible. Guys were doing a lot of big headline shows and playing all these festivals, and you couldn't help but just your eyes were drawn to you. Even as a drummer, I know I'm biased, but there's nobody I know that puts more energy into their performance on stage than you. And I try, but I can't compete with Joe. Has that always been your thing? Is it always just like, man, you leave nothing on the table when you're done?
There it is.
Yeah.
I could list the 5 things, and it's a real rule. Play it like it's your last show. You're only as good as your last show. Play it for 6, 60, 600, 6,000. Play it like your heart means it, and leave them something to remember. And those are the 5 things. And you know, there's that moment where it's like if you go in and you're prepared, then you can be comfortable in your element. And like Dave Grohl said, you may not be the best drummer in the world, or you may not be in the best band in the world, but if the fans or a person leaves and remembers you, then you've done your job.
Yeah.
And like Bonham used to say, play something easy and make it look tough, or play something tough and make it look easy. And both of those, like when we talk about the straightforward, you know, 4 on the floor type beats of like, you know, Metallica, or just the smash groove, it's like that leaves a lot of room to hit hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think you and I both probably get a lot of emotional strength from getting to hit a little bit harder too, right? If you're like me, playing drums when I was a teenager growing up was what saved my life, man, for sure. You know, a friend of mine that I talked to in Montana last week had talked about the shirt that I wore as often as I could in high school, as complete outcast in high school. I was the long-haired rocker dude in a cowboy town, right? You know, you could relate, Idaho, Indiana. And the shirt said drums are my life. And he said, you know, even though everybody gave you shit about that shirt, all of us that really wanted music to be our passion were envious that that's what you were driven for. And that was only part of it, though, because I grew up in the mountains playing drums just to survive. I was an angry, depressed kid, and the more I hit things and got away with it, you know, drums, you're supposed to hit them, right? It was so good it was like therapy, right? So it looks therapeutic. When I watch you play, I'm like, that he's working some shit out right now, you know?
Oh man, very, very much so. I guess there's a reason why drums called to me. When we were younger, the drum set was actually my older brother's and the guitar was mine.
Okay.
And so being the youngest of the family, you could almost say like I didn't have a voice growing up. And finding drums, it was hard to not be heard that way. You know, blah, 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 thunk, the room goes quiet.
Right. Thunder.
Thundercats. Oh, it is so therapeutic. Like I can't even begin to say it. My drums aren't put together right now because I've been hosting karaoke, which has been super fun.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, you know, like 2 or 3 people kind of thing, where it's like, okay, we're doing little pods and stuff. And I've got 3 gigantic projects coming out in the next 2 or 3 months, and so drumming hasn't been my forefront of my focus.
Sure.
And it's completely noticeable where like I'll just fidget and I'm all like tapping on stuff, or I'm like and it's like to be able to play really is such a grounding and centering thing. I mean, I guess it's like how some runners would run, or you know, bakers would bake. Whatever their grounding tool is. I never realized how much music was such a grounding tool for me, because I had also kind of experienced nothing, and that's not a safe comparison. But I was gonna say I've also kind of experienced the Rudy Sarzo kind of experience where music was not fun for me anymore, and now it is. It's fun on the rudimentary level.
So let me ask you. I mean, because I asked Rudy, right? I mean, when you've got adversity and everything outside, those external forces that are taking away the fulfillment that you got from music, what was it for you? What brought it back together again?
I stopped everything in my life. And this was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that, you know, thankfully the world has allowed me time to catch up to it. I stopped everything and cleaned my plate and was like, what do I want to do with my life? Do I even want to be a musician? Do I want to draw pictures of silly girls or dogs? Or do I just want to work like a 9 to 5 and say, oh, that was my life, and now I start the next phase of my life? Well, what ended up happening was as I kind of blush and get a little silly, I don't want to say it's love, but it is love. I shared some songs with a friend and was kind of like, oh, hey, you know, look what I can do, as not like a way of impressing her, but as a way of kind of trying to wave a flag of like, hey, I would like to get to know you. You know, would you like to have some dirty chai tea with me and talk cartoons and comic books? And so she was like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, hey, by the way, what's your favorite kind of music? And so, she expressed, kind of pop punk. So I rattled out a couple little pop punk songs and was like, oh, and like just the euphoria of doing something for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Dude, you of all people can understand, it's like if you're not getting paid for it, you're not going to pick it up or like never give it away for free. Whatever those scenarios were where it was like, I painted myself into a corner of believing recurring revenue would be the ticket to success. And so I would just drive a little harder, drive them a little harder, drive them harder, drive myself harder, and then eventually drove everybody off a cliff. And I knew that's not how to be a friend. That's not how to be a musician. That's not how to be successful at anything. So getting back to the roots of it was the core experience. And it was kind of like shedding the asshole, shedding the expectation, shedding the desire to succeed, and whatever identity that I thought I had. Because what came left was this little boy who was still 14 years old, like asking for approval and wanting to be accepted. And at that point, I'm like, okay, time to put the work into myself. Now that I realize where I am on this menu of life skills, I'm still 14 years old.
Can I ask you? I don't
Sure.
want to interrupt you because this is a really, really important place. When you came to that realization, were you getting therapy at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, very, very much. Yeah.
Right.
And okay, can I uncork a genie, or however to say that phrase?
Sure.
I got divorced September 2018. My life had reached a pinnacle of successes and failures all at the same day. Where essentially I was able to go perform live with a band at a festival, have my mom, my brother, and my daughter there. Nice. And it was like, it still holds such a place for me. My brother's passed on, and things are kind of in flux, and so that was like my high point. I mean, I've done so many other things or whatever, played in so many other places, but to me, that was sharing it with my family. That moment where I'm like, oh, I'm looking for affirmations and visibility, and it came to me there. And then that was also the show that led to my divorce.
Okay.
So, but with that being said, the super great high and then the super crashing low left me in this gigantic valley of what's happening. So I started getting therapy, and my ex-wife is a counselor, drug and alcohol counselor, and wielded the DSM-5 book like a spell book in a way. It was very helpful for her when we needed to dial me down. And with that being said, I got misdiagnosed pretty hard on my actual condition.
Okay. That was when you said misdiagnosed from your ex, because she pulled out. Okay. Yeah. So how the boxes sort of were checked in the DSM-5 was not exactly how a psych or a therapist saw the real condition in Joe.
Right. Yeah. There's just enough of like, oh, here's proof of concept. Oh, oregano can be spicy like cayenne, or red pepper. Close enough. So boom.
Yeah.
You're in the pepper family. Kind of whatever that,
Yeah. No, I get the analogy.
Thank you. And that was not the case. But what ended up having to happen was, of course, I became suicidal. I'm like, oh, if this is my life, oh, everything just crashed. My life is over. my family is this, my professional life is that, my professional career is this, and then it left me with everything I never wanted, trying to build everything I wanted.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, okay, I never got to make any omelets, but I sure broke a lot of eggs. And then I'm walking on eggshells now without getting, with still being hungry for nutrition, emotional nutrition.
Yeah.
And thinking I was never, because of how I was misdiagnosed, thinking I was never going to be satiated. Like I was going to just be totally emaciated and malnourished my whole emotional life. I'm like, man, I don't want to go through that. So, and a couple trips to the hospital, a couple times over last year, led me to get the assessment that I have like, wow, I've got like a 4-course meal of mental illness, which is now knowing it, totally workable. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I would like it if people weren't afraid of me. And it makes a lot of sense to the people closest to me. Man, okay, how much time do we have? I'm like, oh, I could break this open. Is that okay? Can I ramble?
Well, yeah, but before you do, let me tell you, just speaking to that moment, having a label or having a condition identified makes it so much easier to accept the treatment, right? Because if you know that there's something wrong, like, you got a pain in your stomach and you've gone in, you've gotten MRIs and you've gotten x-rays and they're not finding something, but there's a cancer in there somewhere. And it's just when they finally pinpoint it and say, hey, you know what? It's in your kidney and we've just got to extract it. We got to treat it. It's not something cancer's not going to go away, but there's a treatment plan. And having a treatment plan with an identification of where that condition is, then there's a series of steps. There's a process. And I know it's scary at first, but having been diagnosed myself and misdiagnosed myself prior to that, I thought, I'm so grateful now to have an answer, to know what to do with it. So go ahead and ramble. I just wanted to say I can so relate, man.
Thank you. It's been a fascinating, terribly fascinating journey. I can't look away from my own car wreck because it's like, oh, I'm in it. Yeah. So I went and got these assessments and these tests, and basically I found out. So for anybody tuning in at home, please don't be afraid of me, but I am certifiably crazy, and it's legal and admissible in court. So I just that disclaimer kind of pads everything. But
it doesn't indemnify you, man. I'm sorry, buddy.
No. By no means do I say my conditions allow me to behave this way.
Right.
And it's just a bit of an understanding of why and how this clock ticks in 2 different time zones.
Sure. Yeah.
So basically, I've got major depression, which doesn't surprise anybody. And I've got PTSD, which if anybody says my name loud enough, I will just jump out of my skin. Hearing the sound of my name when I was a kid, I knew I was in trouble. So even if somebody's like, hey, Joe, I'm like, what the fuck did I do?
Really? So it wasn't Joseph, but just like Joe.
Just, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yep.
Marking down things to remember for myself when I see
there you go. There you go. And whatever you do, just don't slam on glass when you're looking at me. Like if I'm eating in a restaurant and you're outside and you're like slam on the glass, I will fucking throw my food, scream, and you can count my convulsions like I'm dancing.
You're the monkey in the cage at the zoo.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Careful, I will throw poop at you.
Yeah.
No. Okay. So depression, PTSD. I found out I'm bipolar. Okay. No surprise there in that I'm super excitable and then I'm also super irritable. And what I considered, what I considered creativity or inspiration was actually mania.
Yeah.
And then what I would consider being lethargic and super tired was the low swing of the bipolar. Okay. And, I'm like, oh, cool, man. I just worked really hard for 3 days. And then I'm like super irritable for 2. And I'm like, oh, you got to break omelets to make eggs, or, you've got to have ashes if you're burning hot, something like that. But basically, I was living the condition without understanding it.
Right.
And then the coup d'etat is I kind of have what I'm billing as the Pete Davidson illness. So I call I can't call myself the Pete Davidson of drummers anymore because there's more than I'm not alone.
Yeah.
But I found out I've got BPD, which is a borderline personality disorder, and what that really means is I'm not schizo, and there's only one person living in my head. But it's basically it's broken down to specific behaviors triggered by certain events around certain people in certain circumstances. And so inside of that, it's really easy to describe it like I'm Office Joe, I'm Home Joe, I was Jamie's Joe, I was my daughter's Joe, I was the banjo, and then I was also Teacher Joe. Now the problem with that is none of these people could exist in the same places with the same people at the same time. So I could never be Banjo when I was around Jamie. That was off limits. I could never be on stage Joe at work. That's absolutely ludicrous. I would try to be Jamie's Joe for Aaliyah, but then I wouldn't be able to be myself at all when it was time for me to be myself. So it left me in this enormous identity crisis of behaviors that began conflicting with each other. Like think of it like everything that's on the shelves in your fridge, where it's all streamlined and you've got your milk and you've got your meats and you got your cheeses and you got your snacks and then you've got your vegetables down at the bottom. Think of it like everything just started going haywire and all of it fell down, and you open the refrigerator door and all of these behaviors come out. And it was really hard to understand that all those behaviors were actually coming from one person.
Yeah.
You know, because it was like, at times I believed I was right, but I was living in my illness. At times I thought the world was ending, but I was living in my illness. And then, knock on wood or something, people would perpetuate my illness either unwillingly or unknowingly.
Sure, you bet.
And you know, people were like, "Oh, dude, you seem like a pretty busy guy. Why don't I empower you to be as busy as you can?" And then that would feed my fear of failure, my fear of rejection. It would feed every one of my conditions, and I would still fail anyway. But somebody would either make good money out of it, or I would get a really good project for someone else out of it. So when I would, I'm like, okay, I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. I'm here to be Thunder Joe, right? And I'm like, I'm tuned in, I'm dialed in, and I'm ready. Anybody needs something at the last minute, I will learn your set just to show you I can. And
the hero complex.
You know it.
I do.
The
Dude,
hero complex.
You're talking to a pro right here, man. That was my game.
There, And so if there's anything that I could do to add value to myself by saving someone else, I would. And this past year, I've learned saving myself has been monumental to my existence and to the existence of everyone around me. It's not just stay in my lane. Staying in my lane kept me small. Trying to expand out in my lane got me hurt because I didn't understand how to proverbial pass or navigate outside of my lane. Because I was in everybody's lane. I'm like, oh, you need a drummer? I'm here. Oh, you need a guitar player? I'm here. Oh, wait, you had a bass player and now your drummer's sick? I will play drums.
And bass at the same time.
And sing. Whatever I could, I would. And, the hope there was like, this next opportunity is going to lead into recurring revenue, which is going to solidify my success. So 14-year-old me can catch up to what was in 30-year-old me, which is now 40-year-old me. 40-year-old me, man, as I almost bawl my eyes out, 40-year-old me has been living on a 14-year-old snapshot of what success looks like. And I've never slowed down until this year. So we're talking, was that 26 years?
Can I ask you, 40-year-old, you recognize that this year, and I've talked a lot about a silver lining in the pandemic, that it forced a lot of us to have to slow down. For me, there's no way I would have stepped back and took a look at those kind of behaviors in myself had I not been forced to. I'd fill my schedule. I still find that I have that tendency. But when you mentioned your drive to get that success, that there had to be that constant revenue, you've mentioned it a few times. Revenue is that mention of the success, the outcome of that success, right? And one thing that I've recognized in this pandemic time is that it's all perspective, right? If and I think this might, if you are like me, when we were 14-year-old wannabe rock stars, you could see that success equated to the big car, the big house, lavish stacks of cash, freedom, the ability to go where you want, when you want, to do what you want, when you want, and not have to worry. That the struggle, the financial struggle that we had growing up would be no longer because we've crossed the threshold, and success was the money, the payoff that way. You talked about where we were discussing the hero complex. For me, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a knight. I thought I could be. I thought I could ride in shining armor and be the guy that could save the day, could protect the women from all the bad guys, could could take the princess on the back of my horse and ride off, and I recognized that hero complex, what it did was it was completely ego driven, and I was deathly afraid of sounding egotistical, self-centered, but my behavior was such that it was all self-driven,
Yeah.
Adrienne is in the chat here, and she's talking about how she totally gets the 40-year-old me living on a 14-year-old snapshot of success. I think 99.9% of us do it. A lot of people don't admit it, or they don't recognize it. I mean, the pandemic for me woke my ass up, and I'm not trying to get in the middle of your story. What I'm trying to do is let you know that while you were going through that phase and while you were discovering these things, either with a therapist or on your own, I know you do a ton of self-reflection. You always have. A lot of times, you present that vulnerability in social media. You'll say, wow, I recognize, here are my warts and all, have at them. And I want you to know how fucked up I am because I recognize it in myself, right? When I see those things and I think, you're being awfully hard on yourself, man, because, you're your own worst critic, as we all are. Well, one would hope that we all are. And it's the beauty in it is that you recognize that it was the intent was never malicious, right? That you realize that, you recognize that heroic Joe was not out there to screw anybody over, to make anybody's life worse. You were out there to make everybody's life better, at the benefit of being the hero, right? I mean, everybody wins in our mindset that way. But what happens is if Hero Joe can't be in the same room as Banjo can't be in the same room as, Joe's partner Jamie, then all of those things suffer, right? There's an impact on all those things. And so our hero complex ends up making a negative impact on somebody else. Hi, Caleb, by the way. He's here to see you. So, yeah, Caleb loves you. And
hey, Caleb.
He looks up to you a lot. And you know what, man? This conversation we're having right now is something that he should hear as an aspiring musician and artist. This is reality. This is part of it, right? Is that the growing pains we find when you get to 40-year-old Joe or 50-year-old Kevin, and you recognize perspective on success may have been skewed. And that perspective ends up leading us down a path that can hurt someone else unintentionally. Your intent was never to hurt anybody else.
No.
Like I said, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but
no.
You remember having this conversation? I'm backstage at a huge venue in Salt Lake City. I'm in the green room, and I was so grateful that you reached out to me, because you don't reach out. I don't reach out when I need help either. But there was one time, a couple of hours before we were going on stage, and you and I had a good long talk about this discovery. That was about where things changed for you.
Yeah. Oh, Kevin, I remember that. I was in a really, really deep, dark, very confused, lost place. And you and the dudes from Wang Chung gave me the best advice in the world. And that was document it.
Yep.
Write about it.
Yeah.
And we sort of joked about it where I'm like, oh, I'm having troubles with girls. And they're like, write a song about it. But no, the idea there was put the work in, see it, face it, run, put it in print, make it real, recognize it. And you guys saved my life.
Well, let me tell you, it's about working together. You reached out. It's so difficult to reach out. I mean, and I'm not going to say it's just a male thing, but there is a stigma that we get stuck with when we're younger that men don't ask for help, right? And
Right.
it's goofy. I'm going to put a little link up here because there are people that struggle with this still to this day. The number that's down there, a lot of people could have benefited from having this number during the COVID pandemic. Whether you're a musician or not, there was not a person on this planet that wasn't affected in some way by the pandemic. And what it did for me was that it established an identity crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Kevin Rankin, the drummer guy who gets to go out and share all these experiences on the road, no longer had that identity anymore, right? And I had to look at who's the real Kevin Rankin. And Kevin Rankin, that was a loyal, dedicated husband, had become not that guy. And the guy that was a dedicated boyfriend and a supportive boyfriend. So the partnership, the emotional partnership that I had, all of those identity crises all happened at once. I talked to you about my bottom. It was long after I got sober and was recovery, but I love the idea of this analogy of all the shit in this fridge falling down. That happened to me. I just woke up one day right about my 50th birthday and realized how much those different behaviors that I did affected everyone in my life. And it was weird because all that accountability never happened before. I realized, wait a minute, I was so pissed at that person for the stuff they were doing. When I look at all the common denominators of all those things, there's a common denominator that was me. And it was too much to handle.
There you go.
Couldn't ask for help. So I'm not trying to make this a soapbox moment, but if you guys are watching this and you're in any way relating to what we're talking about, dial the phone number below. And it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. So I interrupted your story there, but you and I connect in a lot of ways, man. And I know and love you for your spirit and your vulnerability. So please continue.
Oh, thank you. Where were we? No, I don't know. We're right about the good news.
Oh, I lost Joe. Come back, Joe. And we were at the pivotal moment. He may have just there he is. Hey, Joe.
Yeah,
we lost you for a second there, buddy. And it was the perfect time for you to say, okay, where were we? The good point was you recognized these things. You found the identity that Joe needed to work on.
Yes, right. Yes. Okay, yeah, no. And so, wow. Okay, now, if there's anything, when we talk about documenting it and processing illness, processing conditions, processing the past, I kind of went on like a spoken apology tour and called up gosh darn nearly everybody from the past 25 years and apologized to them. And told them,
like making amends, kind of.
Really, yeah. It's. I mean, it's very, very. What is that? 8th step, 6th step. It's very much like that, and the reciprocity that came out of it. Like, I'm on great terms with my daughter's mom for the first time ever.
That's huge.
I mean, we talk about wanting to start a family together. Well, I guess it's pretty much criteria to know whether or not you're going to be able to get along. And we found out pretty early on that we couldn't get along. And what a long 16 years that's been.
Yeah.
And it's been really powerful to be able to reconnect on that and have peace. I've never felt peace until this year. And right now, I talk with my friend about the word still. Like somebody's like, oh, you need to be still. You need, as in like no movement. And then whenever I hear still, I hear it's not enough still. So I'm working on. I at least have now introduced the word "still" into my vocabulary. I just need to repurpose it properly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh, I can't even. You have to know this. I can't even tell you how fast my life is operating. You know, I mean, at one point I was in 7 touring bands, full-time 40-hour-a-week job, loyal, dedicated, loving husband, graphic designer, entrepreneur extraordinaire, or whatever, and was even like healthy and fit. And now I'm like one person trying to make my meals on time and walk my dogs. And what a blessing that slowdown is. I thought my mind would be all like, oh, I need to be here, 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 here. And you know how it goes. At some point, we were booked out 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
And now I don't make plans past next week.
You know, the whole concept of one day at a time is not like a recovery type of thing. It is that everybody on the planet only has 24 hours in the day. You don't have any more hours than I do. And Hero Joe, while you are the jack of all trades, you can't be a master of any of those. You can't put 100% into all those bands and put 100% into being that partner and 100% into being a dad and to your dogs and to your mom and to your boss. I tried, man. I was trying to figure out how can you squeeze 3 or 4 more hours in a day, you know, and joke about it. Like, can I clone myself? Maybe I can just take on, you know, you try to find ways to streamline your time, you know, you talked about still. And for me, again, this is not a recovery conversation, but the idea and the concept of serenity sounded so foreign to me because there was so much chaos in my head, right? And for me to take out a day or an hour a day to go out in the woods with my dog seemed so selfish. You know, like how dare I take that time for myself to center my head because my clients are all waiting for me and my kids are needing me to feed them. You know, they're old enough that they can make their own food. My clients have to understand that there are 24 hours in a day and I'm on call for them anytime. My band will be ready and I'll be ready for my band when it's time and I can still give 100% when it's time. The idea of mindfulness where you can focus your mind on one thing at a time. If you're eating, not to multitask and try to like look at your phone or listen to, you know, like 3 conversations at once. It's such a foreign concept, but serenity, peace of mind is phenomenally something I aspire to be. I search for that because you look at the people that are really, really happy with their lives. They've got it figured out that way, right? They may have tons of financial success. And my son and I talk about this a lot, right? You look at the people that, like, he was a huge Neil Peart fan, right? Neil was God to him. He wanted to be the next Neil Peart in Rush.
Sure.
Neil was tormented in a lot of ways, right? You know, he was not a real happy guy. Incredible drummer, right? And wrote the most incredible lyrics, and you know, and I'm not taking anything away from him. But I told my son, I said, look at who your idols are, you know, and look at what they get out of life. I think he sought more out of playing drums than he did on stage because when he's out on his motorcycle and he's riding around looking at the world and experiencing nature, you could tell when in documentaries that that's where he found joy, which is amazing. But at the end of the day, you don't get to take any of the money with you. You don't get to take any of these like tangible objects that you've acquired over the time with success. But, you know, and again, I'm soapboxing, man. I'm stealing your story here, but I'm just telling you, it's a pretty amazing, it's a little, Brian Harrison says it's hard to read Neil's book sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, man, that Ghost Rider book
yeah.
Was one of those life-changing stories for me because I just kind of experienced very similar situations, you know, with my relationship in turmoil when I read that. And it was such a profound thing for me to realize his day job is like a dream fantasy of mine. But to him, he couldn't wait to get off work and, you know, ride 200 miles.
Right.
And it's like, I could ride 200 miles. Would I have the same kind of joy in that? Probably not. Or maybe I could find it. But, you know, that's that to each his own.
Yeah.
And it was his personal journey. And, I mean, if you guys remember the book, he had lost his daughter
And his wife.
And then his wife.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of a man without a country for a little while.
Yeah.
And I kind of went through a version of that. So I thought I would pour myself into the band. And at that point, I was just too much for those guys. And so I really needed to like dial back my life and understand I needed to be my own container. I couldn't just spill over onto people and say, help me.
Yeah.
And they were really supportive of that. And sometimes they weren't. And that taught me the resilience of inner peace. Instead of just continuing to project these behaviors and wonder why it's not working.
Accepted, right?
Accepted. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, boy, yeah, buddy. I mean, like, the great thing about it is that you get to this point, right? As if you're like me, part of my personality is that I'm like beating myself up. I'm flogging myself for going, oh my God, 50 years. And now I'm kind of recognizing that this was what's important. But the beautiful thing is that I'm figuring it out now so that my behavior doesn't have to negatively impact someone else, that I can choose better behaviors. I can work on all of those character defect kind of things that I had, right? For me, man, resentment was a huge thing, right? I held on to so much resentment towards all these people that I felt wronged me. And I'm talking bands, romantic relationships, kids, parents, bosses, whatever. And I looked again at the common denominator and I realized, oh, there's one person in the middle of all of it. And that's me. Where's my part in it, right? So if you think about any conflict you might have had, whether it be with a band or with a relationship, and you think, okay, of course it's a two-sided thing, right? I mean, there's my part and there's their part. For a long time, I wasn't seeing my part in it. I thought I was. I thought I was a great communicator and I was the hero guy, right?
Sure.
And then I realized, wow, you know what? There was a ton of stuff I needed to work on long before I was an equal part, equal member, contributor, And so when you were going through therapy and you got your diagnoses, I'm curious to know the phases that you went through to get where you're at right now. Tell me about, where your mindset was and what you were working towards.
Oh, it was very defeating, very depressing, very real, very raw, and then very challenging. Like, I guess food and music metaphors are kind of where I can hold my own. So it's very much like starting from scratch. When it's like, okay, I've been handed this list of diagnoses, and I'll call them the entrees and the hors d'oeuvres and the full course meal, and it's like, how in the world am I going to make shish kebab and steak tartare and chicken parmesan when whatever lacking tools that I now have to produce this meal. So it was very defeating and very depressing, where I'm like, I didn't even want to take this on. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why me? And then it was very raw, where it was like literally like, start from when you were 2 years old. You kind of, my specific condition happened early on, and the rest of it was a very unhealthy set of coping mechanisms. And so the rawness and the challenge became reparenting myself.
Oh,
and
so you had to be young Joe and parent Joe at the same time. Okay.
Yeah, and it very much became life from this distorted lens that I'd been looking at, with a peak of reality. And then slowly more and more of it became more reality, less, and then I'm able to kind of look at it like this. And it became such a fundamental thing of like, do I like Coca-Cola or Pepsi? Do I like beef or do I like chicken? Do I like men? Do I like women? Do I like daytime? Do I like nighttime? Who was I living for before all of this? What preconceived notions have been in the nature-nurture stage of my life that I'm mimicking that were super unhealthy? And holy cow, man, did I have to come through some really hard truths about saying, my family came from like the Dust Bowl Depression era, and I've been living on family values from 100 years ago.
Right.
And I've been living in a life, in a mindset where in those classic days, men could yell at women, women could hurt their children, children could hurt each other, people were left unchecked. Abuse was called playing. You know, dinner was called knuckle sandwich. Stuff like that. And it's like things that I never understood were called family dynamics. And then, you know, there are those versions where it's like, oh, you don't want to be, you know, that kind of family, or you'll like him once you get to know him, or he's a little rough around the edges. You know, like those phrases that would sometimes prefix my introduction. And I'm like, man, I don't really want to be that guy that has to have a disclaimer. It's kind of funny on stage, but it's really not funny when I'm trying to meet regular, I don't want to say regular people, but people where it's like, I don't want to have that kind of reputation hurt my character like that. So
that's a first impression that's kind of difficult to overcome. It
really is. Yeah. And it's especially when it's the innocence and the ignorance of the situation where I don't know I'm doing it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know what you don't know. And then when somebody's like, why in the world did you just whitewash this entire conversation in front of my family? I'm like, what do you mean? That's what we always talk about in Idaho. Situational awareness is a pretty powerful tool. And, you know, a lot of people don't, well, I can't say that. Myself didn't have that because I you know, pardon the expression here. I had one direction, and that was up, and I was missing all of these life skills.
Yeah.
And so what happened was in the past year, I've taken that, you know, recovery. I've taken the life skills, and I've taken the inventory of myself, and I'm like, what am I missing? What do I need? Why is this way? And then with a lot of help, a lot of grace, and a lot of compassion, and a lot of kindness, I kind of coaxed myself out of myself and in front of me so I could see all of my behaviors. And what an amazing thing. If you don't mind me talking about love just for a second.
I love it. That's good.
Love was a gray language that I'm only starting to understand now. And when I say gray language, let's talk about colors and colorblind. Okay? Let's use this example of Uncle Dennis. All right? If any of my family's watching, Uncle Dennis, you're not colorblind, but don't worry. Let's say Uncle Dennis can't see red, blue, or green. Okay? So us being 3 or 4 years old, walk up to Uncle Dennis. We're like, Uncle Dennis, look at the red on my shirt. He's like, oh, that looks gray to me. And we're like, oh, you're stupid. Because, you know, we clearly know this is red.
Yeah.
And, you know, our mom would be like, oh, you know, your Uncle Dennis doesn't see red like that, so we're going to call it gray. So the imprinting of gray language begins, where 3 or 4 years old, we now understand code with Uncle Dennis. Uncle Dennis can't see red, green, or blue, so everything's gray. So we're like, okay, Uncle Dennis, will you hand me that gray towel? And clearly it was blue. But we say gray to help him out. Well, we get older and we start laughing and we start joking. We're like, hey, Uncle Dennis, do you want to hand me those gray shoes over there? And we knew they were yellow. And we kind of start toying with him, and it's like it becomes part of our thing. You know, you dart our eyes over, and it's like, okay, now the brothers know, the cousins know, we all know this code. Well, now let's change this code out. Instead of red, green, or blue, red is anger. Blue is rejection. Green is positive, safe space, positive reinforcement. None of those were seen like that. And because what really happened was we do these things because we love Uncle Dennis. We love Uncle Dennis. But that doesn't mean what we did was right. That just means we took gray as a love. And we called gray love because we loved Uncle Dennis, so we used gray language. What really happened was this gray language was denial And we were living all of these other emotions under the guise of love, which was really denial. And so for all these years, man, I've never known what real love was. Because, like, why does love hurt? Why does love reject me? Why is love so bipolar in that sense? When love is its own thing. And I've only learned that this year.
How so? Where did that recognition come from?
A lot of help.
Okay.
A lot of help from my therapist, a lot of help from Cedar Hills, a lot of help from the Sundstrom Institute,
okay.
a lot of help from a personal friend who was like, hey, permission to exist. I've never had permission to exist, Kevin. And so this version of I'm going to work 110% all the time because I've never not known that.
Mm-hmm.
And now love is amazing. Now love is in all my languages. It's amazing. Like, I can walk my dogs and laugh. I can cook meals and laugh. I can lay next to a beautiful woman and appreciate the fact that she's there, not whatever the ego could come up with.
Sure.
I mean, there's like actual chemistry that happens. It's not a pose. It's not like Thunder Joe. Oh! It's like, hey, this is me, and it's okay to be fragile. It's okay to be sensitive. It's okay to be half gay. It's okay to be half everything. You know, whatever rejections or whatever versions of finding what loving myself means stopping what I hear people's thoughts or the mimicked perceptions back. And so love is extremely exciting for me right now. It's like a sacred place. It's like my new music.
New discovery. Like the first time you get to hear those bands that lit you up. Yeah, this is like, I got it.
Very much so. And I can say I've never experienced intimacy except through music. Like, you know, those moments where, you know, you play a passage and you make contact with the guitar player or the singer looks back at you and you hit that cue together. And then there's that twinkle in your eye where it's like, this just flawlessly hit.
Yeah.
That to me, people call that the pocket. And I'm like, oh, to me, this is intimacy because this is the only place I've ever found it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can find it elsewhere. And I can find it not in a group of people, not in front of 1,000 people. I can find it myself alone, and I can find it myself with a partner.
That's that's worthy of, you know, a chapter in the book or a book, because a lot of people would seek that. The idea of intimacy and that connection, especially when you could find respect and admiration and love for yourself, is such an incredible quality. I've talked about on the show my aspirations of finding unconditional love. When I look at people that I revered in past history, right? I mean, if you think of this Everest peak being the highest point of acceptance, love, unconditional, Gandhi, right? A Christ figure. For me, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, is a hero of mine, right?
Find the helpers.
You know what? If I can aim towards that tip of Everest to get to that point where I can embody some of those qualities, to me, that's more of what I seek now as 50-year-old Kevin than what Lars Ulrich has, right? I mean, to me, a couple of years ago, I was in Thailand and I spent one day, an entire day, I had this former monk give me a tour of all these temples, but we went behind the scenes to talk to a lot of these training young monks, these kids that were giving up their entire life to learn how to be completely unconditional, to just support love and peace and kindness and grace. And it fascinated me because what I was always doing was going to rock concerts to see like that. I wanted larger than life, big, bombastic, and it was really changed. It changed my perspective on what I sought. And again, the peace that there was this service that they were putting forth, and for me, I just wanted to let go of judgment, let go of resentment, because I had a lot of it. I still do, the ton. I work on that kind of stuff, but the love and the intimacy, yeah, I had a different perspective on it too, and it cost me relationships. And it really.
Oh yeah.
And I had never been single, right? I was married to the girl that I met when we were 12, right? So we grew up together and we were married 28 years. I instantly, and even overlapped a relationship with a really wonderful human as well. I mean, she rocked my world in all sorts of ways, but I realized I wasn't ready for that because since I was with my wife for so long, I never really learned how to truly communicate with those love languages that you talked about. And so it's been a couple of years now, and I kept thinking, well, when am I going to find those things? When am I going to be ready to be a equal partner? And just like you said, I've been working really, really diligently to learn to love myself first. Because if I'm not really comfortable with who I am, there's no way somebody else is going to be, right? And so I want to work on Mr. Rogers' qualities first. I want to be like aiming towards that trajectory, going, okay, are these qualities, are my actions congruent with my values? Those are my values. Are my actions congruent with that trajectory? If they're not, I got to realign. And so, Brian here in the chat saying love evolves. It can be elusive that way with a life partner. He knows he's got an incredible life partner. He's been through past relationships that maybe didn't work out, but it's really great to see the work that you're at right now because it's something I'm seeking, and I love that your discoveries have led you to this point where you're seeing that Joe is what Hero Joe really wanted to be all along.
Exactly. Oh, you nailed it, Kevin. And there's that moment where I look up to mentors like yourself and like Brian. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that you're able to hang out with us today. Where you guys are a couple years older than me and have been around and have settled into your skin. And I really look up to you guys. I don't want to put a pedestal on you because that's just not appropriate, but I think the world of you, specifically you two, because of how you really maintain what you have going on. And if I can have a taste of that, I got to be careful about jealousy or envy. If I can have a taste of that, that would be wonderful. And if I can be living it when I'm, a little older, that would be ideal. And if I could have a taste of it sooner, serenity now. Yeah.
You're doing the work, man.
It's here. And thank you. One thing I never really thought too much of because it was, focus on your strengths. Focus on your strengths and you can get through. And if you work on your weaknesses, turn your weaknesses into strengths. So then I would be like, okay, well, I'm not that great of a guitar player. Oh, here, let me get a better guitar player. Oh, I'm an okay drummer. Let me try to be a better drummer. And then what I was totally missing was, man, how to be a good person. Because I thought these two strengths could get me through. I mean, and you talk about, Neil as being a great example of somebody who wasn't really happy.
Yeah.
My idols were Hetfield and Ulrich, who, who would be like, fuck you if you don't like this. This is what we're doing. And it's like, with that, I actually have to give out a huge apology. Can I public apologize here? I would like to publicly apologize to Kevin Staley. I did not realize through all my time in Motorbreath and all my time in hanging with him, I was treating him like my older brother because he's a couple years older than me and, hey, brother, it's like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man. What you gonna do? No. That 14-year-old mentality of mine, and escapism and success in music I wanted to take Kevin with me as my brother as we were running from my childhood.
Mm.
Kevin has no need to be part of my childhood. Kevin has no need to be part of my desperation for success. And I ran right through him thinking we were all going together.
Mm.
But if what they never tell you is the aftermath of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Shit shatters,
Yeah.
man.
Right.
And so what ended up happening was I kind of splintered him pretty negatively, and then I just shot off in another direction. And with all that, I would just like to publicly apologize and be like, Kevin, hey buddy, I'm really sorry that I tried to live my fears through you, and I'm really glad that we're able to play music. And whenever all this comes out as the pandemic passes and the vaccines happen and everything, it'll be a great pleasure to share the stage and rock for fans again. So I know you're in Hawaii and you're going to miss this or whatever, but just know that I'm thinking of you right now, bud.
Hawaii goes to the internet too. Staley better be watching this. And yeah, I think he's probably meeting my buddy Brian Oakley over there on Kona right now. And
there you go.
Brian was an incredible inspiration to me in a band in Montana. He was out of Billings, Montana.
Sure.
He's a resident bass player and guitarist now in Kailua, just doing the gigs. Larry Smith jumps in with him a lot.
Oh, fun,
so
yeah.
It's Brian's birthday today, so I want to wish him a happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Brian.
Let me tell you, one thing that I've always appreciated the fact of when you're going through this sort of wisdom development as adults, being accountable for your stuff, atoning for those things, right? You admit your faults, you seek amends, if you will, for somebody you might have harmed. You're a big one at the public apologies, and I like that this presentation of your apology is sincere and authentic and not so self-deprecating. For me, oftentimes my demeanor was that I'm a piece of shit. I screwed you over and I feel bad about it. You recognize where your mindset was at the time and you point that out so that it can be educational to someone. I think that's a really, really great thing. It's not just saying, hey, I'm sorry, but you can say, my life was doing this. And it doesn't sound like you're trying to justify what you did either. It sounds to me like you're saying, I came to the realization that my behavior caused this. And for that, I am regretful. And so we can all learn from that. On this show, a handful of times, I'll ask people about guilty pleasures. But I think, the thing that really sticks out to me is talking to people about legacy. It's been different with so many different people, but because of your transformation, because of the work that you're doing and where you're at today, 40-year-old Joe is probably has a different perspective than 30-year-old Joe, 14-year-old Joe. When you look back, when it's all said and done, 99-year-old Joe is looking back at his life and he looks at the impact that he's had on others. What is the legacy that you would like to be remembered for?
Okay, thank you for that, because I don't want to respond with 14-year-old Joe, which was to change the world. I don't want to respond with 30-year-old Joe, which was to make an impact on the world. 40-year-old Joe, I think I would like to be remembered for breaking the cycle. It's been a long road, man, and change is hard, and there's no stopping this in my family, and it stops with me by choice. And for all the generations that come, I would like them to look at me like a true beacon of change. And if I can't change the world, I can at least be a good example for my family. And that's my real legacy.
I love it, man. Yeah. You're on the same lines as Dave Aberzies the other day. He had a very similar response. to me, this show embodies so much of an opportunity for you and I to get a chance to get to know the heart deeper. You and I have spent a lot of time at shows together, shooting the breeze, but oftentimes with everybody in this industry, it's superficial at first. But when you and I get a chance to spend more time, the heart opens right up, man. Warts and all, dude. The vulnerability comes out. It means a lot that you would share it here, in this platform. And so I'll tell you, the folks that are watching this, and if you're watching this later on, um, I I really want you to take note of the humanity, the authenticity behind what Joe is saying, because we've all got some of that, whether it's the hero complex or the self doubt or family trauma that has manifested into something that seems impossible to overcome, impossible to harness, and impossible to break. But your superheroes, Joe, your superhero attributes, not just your amazing artistry, your amazing musicianship, but your willingness to look at those things to change that cycle, I think are so inspiring for a lot of people. And I'm glad that you're vocal about it. I'm glad that you did the public apologies. I'm glad that you show your journey, the work that you do musically, emotionally. And the people that have you at work are really blessed to have someone so diverse, in their interests, but also in wanting to be a better human being. I feel blessed to have you in my life, man, And so I have to thank you so much, man, for reaching out when you need to. I really appreciate you being here to share this story. I can't wait to see what 50-year-old Joe becomes. And, and if you get to one of those places where you want to bounce a couple of ideas about borderline personality disorder, give me a shout, man. I'm working on seeing that the world doesn't necessarily, it wasn't paved for cats like us that have that diagnosis, right? So we've got to learn how to put a square peg in a round hole. You've got the superpowers to be able to, fit into those things and probably would make it more successful than what a round peg would have done in the first place. You just have to harness it, and I'm really glad you're working on it. So, man, thank you. I love you. And
Thank you, Kev.
I'm looking forward to a long friendship and journey so that I can take inspiration from Joe Spencer. Thanks to your mom for sharing you today and for your day gig for sharing you. And man, this is awesome. Brian Harrison, I'm glad you stuck around, man. He said he loved the interview.
Thank you, Brian.
Dude, Brian's interview last month was another one. Brian, is another guy that keeps his cards close to the vest sometimes because he's a real feeler, but people don't get to see that because they see that that stoic musician. But I love that he shared that honesty too. So Mike Klaus, thank you for being here too, man. Mike, good Lord, dude, you of all people are one of those guys that's so supportive. This show, you guys, has been a highlight for me, and today's episode for sure. Got so much cool stuff coming up, and I'm grateful to have Joe be a part of this thing. All of you guys. For those of you that I don't know that have been watching the chat, please subscribe to this and then go back, listen in on what Joe had to say because there's a lot in there. I'm going to go back and dig in because that was kind of a therapy session for me. So I appreciate it, man. And you just let me know where to send the check, right? So,
we'll just walk our dogs together, bud.
I'm ready. Oh, you know what? Yeah, Brian Harrison and I, we have a Mount Tabor hike that we're supposed to do too. So maybe the three of us can get our pups out, huh?
Oh, that sounds great.
Brian Cratchman must be a buddy of yours. Said that was moving and inspirational. Thanks for telling your story. Can't wait to see you behind the kid at the next Parabola and Metallica show. So, yeah, man, if you guys haven't seen Joe play drums, check out the link below, vandalism.com/Lumus the Barbarian. It's ridiculous. This guy is something else, man. So, Bobblehead, I really appreciate you being here. I freaking love you. And you call me if times get dark. You just want to chat. Thanks to all of you guys for being here. Subscribe to the channel. And then get back here because Tuesday, let me say, like next week, let me tell you who's coming up. All right. So folks can see. We've got Bobby Pilata, the creator of Northwest Talent Spotlight. And he's one of those guys that's tried to make music, live music, a reality for people during the pandemic. So Bobby's going to come on and talk about his thing. Adrian Ost, incredible drummer from this area, but he's been LA for a long time. You know him from Power Man 5000. He worked with Bush and he worked with The Cult and all these other bands. And so he's going to be here on Wednesday, 3 o'clock.
Wow.
Brian Harris, not Brian Harrison, incredible keyboardist, plays with Curtis Salgado, and he's a Boston guy, but a beautiful Northwestern guy. He's going to be here on Thursday, 15th. Next week, Darby Mills from the Headpins, one of my favorite singers in all of rock and roll, is going to be here on 4/20 of all days. Brian Foxworth, one of the greatest drummers in the Northwest. Bad dude. Plays with everybody. Like Curtis Salgado is one of his gigs, but he's played with everybody. And the day after that, you mentioned country earlier, Joe. The 22nd, I got Dolly Parton's sister, Stella, on the show. She's got her record label, and she's a Nashville artist and really a freaking incredible human being. So that's all coming up in the next 2 weeks. Lots of shows coming up. So subscribe to the channel. Go back and check out these interviews. Last week, Tawny Katane, Rudy Sarzo blew my mind. On Monday, Dave Aberzees and Melvin Brandon and Stevie Salas. Crazy stuff. And it's all free. So come back here, youtube.com/allaccesslive with Kevin Rankin. Thanks to 5-Star Guitars for being a sponsor. And go get your access to Jennifer Batten's Guitar Cloud Symposium. That's it, folks. Have a beautiful weekend. Be good humans. Be good to each other. Be good to yourself.